everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this weekend is a long weekend. I don't have too much planned. I'm going somewhere this morning, and obviously I'll have plans for the actual holiday, but I'm going to be spending a lot of time just kind of doing stuff around the house and chilling because I have a lot of people-y time coming up because we go to Disney in a week, and I don't really want to deal with people for a few days. So I'm going to read this weekend. Today is still technically August, and I've completed all the books I wanted to read in August. I was going to go into The Summer Girl, which is the final book in the Avalon Bay series. I just finished Bad Girl Reputation, but I'm just not feeling it right now. So I don't want to read any books that I have on my September TBR today because it's not September. I'm in a mood because I'm a little slumpy, and I think it's just because I have a lot going on right now. But I don't really know what I want to read. Like, I'm in a mood read, but I'm not sure exactly what I want to read. So what I'm going to do is spin a wheel 5 times, a color wheel, pick 5 books off of this, and then based on the color, but also based on the mood I'm in. And then this weekend, I will just read from those 5 books. I'm not gonna read all 5 books, but I'm gonna read from those books. So yeah, that's it. We're just making it up as we go along. I wanted to do like a hangout with me while I kind of try to not slump out before September and before this trip and just kind of chill for the weekend. My air conditioning is also broken, so it's a little hot in here. So we're gonna have to get through that together as well, but let's just spin and see what we get, and maybe once I have these 5, like one of them will really speak to me. I don't know. Right now, there's a lot of them speaking to me and I can't make a decision, so let's get the first spin done. Black. Okay, so what are our options here? You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. That's kind of blue and black. Final Girls is kind of, that's pretty black with red. Bride is black. There are some books up here I can't read because these are Shadowhunters books, so I'm not there yet. The Familiar, I'm gonna put You Shouldn't Have Come Here back because there's more, it's like a dark green more than anything. We have The Ravens, which is like blue-black. I think that's it. So what do I want to read out of these? That is the question. I'm going to put Final Girls back because if I read a Riley Sager, it's not that one that I'm wanting to read. So I have a thriller, fantasy romance, and then just like a more adult fantasy romance, I think. I don't know. I think this is a fantasy romance, but I'm not sure. It's higher fantasy than The Bride, but do I want to read this right now? I think I'm going to go with The Familiar. That might seem weird for being a little slumpy, but I've just read a lot of romance, and maybe that's why I'm slumping. I don't know. But we're going to go with that one. I don't have to read it because I'm going to pick 5, but out of those 3, that one's the one that's speaking to me the most. So we're going to go with The Familiar. The next one. Is that green? Green. Immediately I see Masters of Death by Olivia Blake, which I've really been wanting to read. King of Scars, is this blue or is this green? It's like teal and gold. Ooh, that's, I don't know why. Again, I'm picking like weird ones for like you'd think I wouldn't want because I'm slumping. Trust of the Emerald Sea. Business Casual is green, but I still have to read Mixed Signals, which is beige. Can't read that because I still have to read another book. I have First Lie Wins, but I'm not feeling that right now either. I think I'm going to pick between these 2. Please hold. You know what? I think I'm going to pick this one. And I actually might read this one because I've really been wanting to. And I'm in the mood to do it, so I feel like I need to push myself to read it when I'm actually in the mood for it. So that is option number 2, and it's looking like that might be option number 1 out of the 2 that are on there now. So spin 3. Black again. I'm gonna go with Bride then, because we're not pulling them all back out, and that was my second option. I hope I get a different color this time. I should also mention these are all books that are on my like I want to read by the end of 2024 books that I just put out it's like 70 some books that I just put out a thing for. So book 4, Silver. The only one I see is this one. Is like not excited as I am about some of these. This will actually help because out of the 5 I pick, there will be one that stands out. I don't even know what's back here. Oh, okay. Hellbent is the only one I have. It's gray, but it's the only like silvery book I have. So we'll put that aside. These are all really fall books, but we'll see. And the final book. I hope it's not a repeat. If it's a repeat, I'm picking a different color. I'm not doing silver again. I can't. I only had one book. This color wheel is not very white. Picked really boring colors, color wheel. I have The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. Twisted Games is kind of white. These are like very, very light colors of what they are. And I was looking at this one too. I have Middle Tide by Sarah Crouch. I mean, that's got a lot of green on it, but the like back cover is white. And I think that's it. None of those are white. Okay. I don't know why I'm even pretending not to know which book I'm gonna pick out of these ones. The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. That is my option there. So with these 5 options, I can already tell you which book I'm gonna go for first, and it's probably not one that I would have picked up had I not done this, which is Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know too much about this. I think it's a standalone, at least as of now, and I have been wanting to read one of his books because I want to tackle the Mistborn series next year. I want to attempt to tackle it. So this is only like 350 pages too, which is really short for a fantasy. So I'm excited to finally dive into his world, but this is where I'm going to start this weekend with this book. So once I do what I got to do this morning, come back, get a little far into this, I will check back in with you guys. We can chat a bit and I'll give you some thoughts on the book. All right, so it's quite some time later. I'm back. I've read 70 pages of Trust of the Emerald Sea, and it is a pretty fast-paced book for what I was expecting. I wasn't sure how like quickly I'd be able to get through his writing, but it flows really nicely. All I know right now is that we have a girl named Tress who is from this island off the Emerald Sea, and nobody leaves that island except like the royalty people. So people that have to report to the king are the only ones that are allowed to leave the island, and they're very strict about that. But when her friend Charlie ends up leaving the island and then the Duke returns without him, she goes off to find him because nobody else seems to care. So she tries to get off the island, and obviously she's sheltered because she's never been away from home. So she's learning who to trust, who not to trust, what the real world is like. So far I'm enjoying it. It is very like whimsically written, I would say. I do feel like it's going to be a lot different than the Mistborn series, but that's fine. So there's only like 360 pages in this book, so I'm hoping I'll get to finish it today, but if I don't, I don't. Oh, 370? 365. So I'm just gonna keep reading and I'll update when I can. I don't know how much more I'm gonna be able to tell you because that's pretty much all I could give based on the back. But that's where we are. And so far, so good. So I have like 100 pages left of Trust of the Emerald Sea. And this is different than I thought. I think I kind of knew what it was gonna be about going in because it starts off like you think it's gonna be a little bit like of a romance. It does compare it to The Princess Bride on the back, and I think that is pretty accurate of a overarching storyline. But it really is about like Tress finally leaving the place that she grew up and never, she hasn't seen the rest of the world and she doesn't really know what's out there. And this is her adventuring out for a specific reason, but also finding out more about herself and what she's capable of and all of that. And I've loved that for her. So I've enjoyed it. It's been a much quicker read than I thought it would be because Brandon Sanderson is such a iconic fantasy writer. Everybody loves him, and the Cosmere has, it's massive. and continuing to grow. So I'm excited. This is making me excited to get into the other stories, which is what I was hoping this would do, which is why I wanted to read this before the end of the year, so that I was excited to go into Mistborn next year. But I do like his writing. It's funny and serious at the same time. Like, he puts enough humor into this book that it is like, it's not super stressful fantasy. Like, they're in very dire circumstances, but there's enough humor in it, if you like get his humor, that it keeps it a little bit lighthearted. So I'm interested to see how this is gonna wrap up. I'm obviously 100 pages left. I'm almost to that point, I would assume. Oh, the magic system, that's what I wanted to talk about. There's a very unique magic system in here that has to do with like the spores and like each of the 12, I think there's like 12 areas of this planet, and they all have a different type of spore, and they all do different things. And they're activated kind of the same way, and there's like this massive fear of them because if you don't know how to like wield them properly, they're deadly, which I think is the purpose of them as well, like a weapon. But that has been a big part of this storyline, and it also is just pretty unique. Like, I've never read anything like that. So gonna finish this one up, and then we'll move on to whatever I'm feeling like reading next. All right, so I just finished Trust of the Emerald Sea. I really liked this book. I think it was a great way to start my journey into Brandon Sanderson's writing. And now I'm like even more so looking forward to reading the Mistborn series, trilogy, double trilogy, whatever it is, next year. I'm not going to start that this year, but really enjoyed this. Recommend if you like, I wouldn't say this was like a cozy fantasy, but I would say it kind of borders on that. So highly recommend. And now I'm going to stray a little bit from plan because I was supposed to read a few romances this weekend, but I wanted to read a little bit of fantasy. Now that I've read that, I do want to try to get through the Legacy and finish out the Off-Campus series. This is also a book I want to finish before the end of the year. So I'm going to read this next, and then I'll go back to the books that we picked out with the color wheel. So it's the next day, and I'm halfway through the Legacy. So this is essentially just like 4 novellas, one for each couple from the Off-Campus series. And we started with Logan and Grace, and now we're on, then I went to Dean and Allie, and now I'm about to start Tucker and Sabrina's. And then I guess we'll close out with Hannah and Garrett. But I'm enjoying this. Like, it's a nice like extended epilogue for each of the couples. So nothing crazy, nothing that I wasn't expecting, but it is just like a nice way to tie up that whole series. So gonna continue reading this. Hopefully it won't take me too much longer to get through the rest of it, and then we'll move on to the next book. Completed the Legacy. Again, really enjoyed this. It was just a cute, fun way to wrap up the Off-Campus series. Not really much else to say about that. The next book I'm gonna read was one of the ones I picked from the color wheel, and that is The Reappearance of Rachel Price. It is getting into like fall feelings this week, like it's going to be cooler, and I just really want a good thriller. I want a fast-paced read. Not that the Legacy wasn't, but I've been itching to get at this book since I bought it earlier this year. So finally going to get into Holly Jackson's newest release, and I'll touch base once I've read a little. So I'm like halfway through this. I was just not even paying attention and realized I didn't update yet, but I'm about just over 50% of the way through, and the basic premise of this book is that we have this girl named Annabelle whose mother disappeared when she was 2. That is Rachel Price. Currently, she's 18, so it's 16 years later, and this like documentary team wants to do a special on the disappearance of her mother. So they're in town to film this, and while they're filming it, her mother reappears. So Belle, she goes by Belle, is very suspicious of her mom. She thinks it's like something super fishy. Some of the things that her mom is saying that happened are changing slightly every time she tells the story, and she's just suspicious, like she's acting suspicious and everything. So Belle is out to like actually figure out what happened. Like, she doesn't trust that her mother actually was taken. She thinks she left, and there's like this bigger plot, but that's pretty much the entire premise of the book. Now we're just following her as she tries to unravel clues and figure out what actually happened. Very interesting so far. I think I may know what happened or where this is going, but I'm not 100% sure. So we'll see. I started like towards the end of 5 Survive, which was the last book I read by her, to kind of figure out how it was going to end. And I did figure that one out, but this I think could go like possibly 2 ways from where I'm seeing it. So we'll see if either of those are even right. So gonna finish this up and then I'll update. I'm actually going to be going, like I said, to my parents' house for a bit because of the heat. So I'm gonna go get the next 2 books that I want to read, and I'm not gonna take my camera to my parents' house because it's like the holiday. But depending on what I read in the next day or so, I will update after I get back home tomorrow. So let me go grab the other books. All right, so I have 2 books planned to possibly be in the rest of this vlog. I don't know, it just depends on how fast I get through finishing this one and obviously the next 2 books. So Daydream by Hannah Grace is actually on my September TBR, and now that it is officially September, I do want to read this. So this is the next book I'm going to go into because it'll give me a little bit of a reprieve from reading the thriller before I go into the final book that I'm planning on reading in this vlog. I'll probably continue it even if it takes me past the weekend because it was a mood read that I started on the weekend, and that's the point of this vlog. But the final book that I'm going to try to keep in this vlog is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I have this like weird urge to read this book right now. Like, it's been on my shelf for months. I bought it earlier in the spring with the intent of obviously keeping it until it gets closer to fall, and I wanted to keep it for like October. If you saw my TBR video for September, I actually had a chance to, I think, pick this, and I went with another book instead. But now I can't stop thinking about this, so I do want to read it. And this will be the last book that we finish this vlog out with. So depending on where I get in the next day, will depend on what I update when I get home tomorrow. But that's the plan for the rest of it. I will update with thoughts on the books after I've read them, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Hey everyone, so it's the next day, and I finished The Reappearance of Rachel Price last night, and I really did like this book. I thought I knew where it was going, and I wasn't completely wrong, but the way that she wrapped it up and the twists at the end, I didn't see it happening is the way it played out. So it was still really fun and really fast paced, and the ending, like, I didn't want to put the book down for the last like 200 pages. I felt like the first part of the book was a little slow and a little drawn out, but like the last 200 pages did not want to put the book down. So really enjoyed that one. Literally just finished Daydream like 10 minutes ago. While this, I don't know if this is my favorite within the Maple Hills series. I think I want to sit on my rating for this one. I'm not sure exactly. It's going to be at least a 4-star. I'm just not sure where it's going to fall within the 4 to 5-star range. I really did like this. I loved Henry and I loved Hallie. Like, I feel like I had parts of their personalities in the, like, some of the things they struggled with, I feel like I struggle with, and they deal with it in a similar way to me. Like, Henry has a tendency when he's super stressed out to just kind of like want to be by himself and want to not deal with anyone, and he basically like goes into his like, I don't know how to describe it. He describes it better than I can, and I just read it and I can't even think of how he described it, but basically he just escapes into his own head and he doesn't want to deal with anyone else. And that's how I am, except I escape into books. When I am stressed, the amount of reading I do directly correlates with how stressed out I am, because that is my way of dealing with it. So I completely understood that. The final book I'm going to read in this vlog is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is like a vampire fantasy romance that takes place around like the time of the Spanish Inquisition. That's all I know. So I'm very interested to start this. For some reason, I've just really been wanting to read it for the past few weeks. So gonna get started on this. Probably won't get too far today, but I will update you all when there's something to talk about. Okay, so update on The Familiar. I'm only like 100 pages in. I just really didn't have a lot of time to read last night or today. We have our main female character, Luisa. I'm gonna butcher half these names because they're all Spanish, but she's like, she has magic and she works as this like servant in this house that's not like a super rich house, but she's like one of 2 servants that works there. And she accidentally exposes the fact that she has magic, and her owners, whatever you want to call them, the people of the house, try to like capitalize on that. So they like invite people over for her to show them like her party tricks and stuff, and then it ends up backfiring on them because it catches the attention of somebody that is like higher up that needs a champion to enter this like competition for the king, and he's trying to like win the king's good graces. So he finds out about her and he's trying to have like her trained to be his champion that he can now offer towards the king. And from there she's training with like someone I think that like the king owns, that he's like a, I don't know what he is. I think vampires come into this in some play, but like I don't know that he's a vampire. He's just like some unnatural immortal person. That's all I got. So I'm not sure if he's considered a vampire at this point, but anyway, he's the one training her, and he's like protective of her because he wants her to succeed, and he's not sure that she can because she's like weak and doesn't know really what's going on. So that's pretty much all I'm at right now. There's like obviously more intricacies and everything, but the main premise is that she's training to be a champion for this like nobility man that is trying to win back his good graces with the king by entering her into this competition. That's all I got. So it's interesting so far. There's just a lot going on. I'm trying to figure out exactly where the story's going. And it's not a very long book. It's under 400 pages and I'm already over 100 pages in, so I don't really know how it's gonna wrap up. It's not what I thought it was gonna be, so we'll see how it progresses, but that's where I am right now. Time to wrap up the vlog. It feels like it's been like forever, but it really has only been like a few days. I just have so much going on right now. First book I read in my mood reading vlog was Trust at the Emerald Sea. This was one of the books I chose with the color wheel. This was the green book, and I really loved this book. It was like the perfect like whimsical fun fantasy that really didn't have any spice, any heavy romance. There was a romance plot, but it was like a subplot, I would say. So I think this is a really good way to get into Brandon Sanderson's universe because I don't believe that he writes heavy romantasy. I think he writes more high fantasy, but this had some humor in it. It was fast-paced, it was interesting, it kept me going. So definitely, if you've never read one of his books before, not that I can say anything for the other ones, but I think that this is a good entry because it was very easy to digest and get into, and it's a standalone. I ended up giving this a 4.5 stars, and you will have seen it in my August wrap up because I did finish this the last day of August. Then I wanted to read a romance, so I actually went to a book that I didn't pick with a color wheel and read The Legacy by Elle Kennedy and finished out the Off-Campus series. So this is done. This is one of the books I wanted to read by the end of the year. So was Trust at the Emerald Sea. All of these were actually. So finished out this. Very happy for that, and I enjoyed this. It was basically 4 novellas. Each couple had one, and it kind of was just like an extended epilogue. So nothing groundbreaking, but it was nice to kind of solidify and tie up all of their stories at the end. I gave this 3.75 stars, and it was like probably 1.5, 2 on spice because there still was some spice. Then I went back to the books that the color wheel picked, and I chose The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is her newest release. I've had this for a few months and have been really wanting to read it, but it just didn't feel like the right time. Really liked this book. It took a different turn than I thought. Like, I kind of thought it was going in the direction that it did, but there was still things at the end that surprised me, which is always great. So the twist, the big twist I did not see coming. So she always kind of gets me a little bit at the end. The same thing with 5 Survive. Like, I kind of knew the gist of where it was going, but there were still tiny little things at the end. And her books are so fast paced. I read this in like a day. So again, another win for me on Holly Jackson. None of her books have ever been like a 5-star read for me. Even The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I liked that series, but it wasn't like a 5-star series for me. But I know that I'm going to enjoy her books when I pick them up. And that's all I can ask for in an author. So this was a 4-star, and there was a little, I would say, spice, but maybe like half. That's all we'll go with that. It's a YA novel. There's really not much spice. Then I went and picked another book that I just really wanted to read, which was a romance, because all of the books that the color wheel picked from the beginning of this video were like fantasy, dark fantasy, thriller books, so nothing lighthearted. So I wanted to read something lighthearted, and I read Daydream by Hannah Grace, and I loved this. Henry is so sweet. I loved him. I loved Hallie. This couple was just everything, and Hallie was me. There are like scenes in this book that I'm like, girl, I've been there, and I could totally relate, and I loved that about her, and I could really relate to Henry and how he dealt with stress. He's a person that kind of like internalizes their stress and pulls away from a lot of their people when they are stressed out and they don't know how to handle things. They just stop talking to everybody, and I definitely am guilty of that. Not that it's not a way to cope, but it's probably not the healthiest way to cope. But anyway, really related to him with that. The romance was sweet. It was definitely a little bit more of a slow burn, I would say, than the other 2 books were, but that was perfect for this couple, and I loved it. 4.5 stars again, and 1.5 spice, we'll say. Spice is so subjective. I hate rating it, but I always like to give a little bit of an idea of like my opinion of where it lands on the scale. Nothing I don't think has ever gotten a 5 from me, because the one book that I probably would have given that to, I DNF'd because things happened in it that I just couldn't get past. Final book I read was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and I just finished this up. I did not really wrap it up yet in this vlog, so this was an interesting, like, it was a historical fantasy, I guess would be the best way to describe it. So we had our main character, Louisa, who has like this power that I'm not really exactly ever really sure how it really manifested. I think it was just like within her family and her heritage, and she manifested it by like singing and humming, and it was different languages based on what she needed. So that's like the best way I can describe it. And she's like I forget what they call it, but basically a servant in this household that's not a very like wealthy household, and they find out that she can do magic, and they kind of like try to, why can't I think of words? This is because my brain is going in 10,000 directions because there's so much going on in my life right now. They try to use her. There's another word I was trying to think of and I couldn't think of it, but they try to use her to get like people to come to their house so that they can go to like get that reciprocated back to them and go to these other people's, wealthier people's homes for dinners and stuff. So that ends up backfiring because it draws the attention of people that they don't want it to draw the attention of, and they put her into this like competition to be like the king's basically holy servant, but like holy magical person that would like soldier kind of thing. Again, I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. It was a very different book than I've ever read. It was very enjoyable. I did not want to put it down. Like, I thought about it when I wasn't reading it, which is weird for a book like this. That's not typically, it's one I can kind of put down and come back to without really thinking about it. But once the story really picked up and you like met the familiar who was Santangel, I don't know how you say Santangel. I don't know how you said his name, but that was who the familiar was. And it wasn't exactly the kind of familiar I was thinking. When I think familiar, I think of like witches. I think of like witches that have like, you know, cats or whatever. And then I think they call vampires servants familiars as well. Like the people that serve a vampire for very long. And I think they're considered immortal. But anyway, he was immortal, but it was kind of a different story, which was interesting. There is a little bit of a love story in this, which is always lovely, but none of her love stories are really, I say, like the forefront of a story. Same thing with like Shadow and Bone and Crooked Kingdom series, and even like Crooked Kingdom series, the Six of Crows duology, and even Ninth House. Like, I feel like there's a like insinuation of a romance there, but it's not the forefront. Anyway, they enter her into this competition, and a lot of things just start backfiring on them, and she's not really comfortable with her magic in the way that they think she is, and it's kind of a trial situation. So, still really enjoyed this. Definitely liked it more than I thought. I was a little skeptical going in, but this was a 4-star read for me, which makes this, and I'd say like a 1.5. We'll give it a 1 spice. This was a pretty successful reading vlog. I'd say I had 2 4s, 2 4.5s, 1 3.75, and that's just because it wasn't anything out of the ordinary from what I was expecting. It didn't blow my socks off, but I still enjoyed it. So definitely successful. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you've been wanting to mood read. This is a mood reading vlog. What have you been in the mood for? Are you still reading romances because it's summer? Are you starting to get into thrillers, fantasy? Let me know. And let me know if there's any books that are really calling your name that maybe I don't have on my list, because I'm just expanding my list right now. Trying not to buy books, but I am making quite the list of books that I do want to purchase when I read some of the ones on my physical TBR. So thank you so much if you made it this far. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content so you don't miss out on anything, and I hope to see you all in the next video.